So welcome to the CX Mechanic Workshop, and today I'm delighted to welcome Gustavo Imhof from CX Ahead and now, of course, Avado. Gus is a customer experience practitioner who was named in the 30 under 30 rising stars in customer experience and who's worked across multiple industries with customer insights, customer experience, strategy and innovation. So as a speaker, an advisor and a writer on CX, he has collaborated with some of the world's largest brands to give talks in French, Portuguese and English. And of course, you're an international best-selling author with our collaboration in the Customer Experience 3. So welcome to the workshop, Gus. Really great to see you.
Thank you very much, Nick. That's a brilliant intro. I wish I could introduce myself in that way, but I probably shrink in shame. So thank you for that.
No, it's absolutely just. And it's really good to spend some time talking to you about something that's quite relevant to both of us. Yeah, you and I have spent a large part of our careers measuring people, looking and collecting feedback from customers. But there's lots of varying opinions at the moment about the right way of doing voice of customer, the right measurement and what works. So what works best for you?
I think it's staying away from the extremes, right? Is you have a lot of people that have that cookie cutter approach, is NPS is best, CSAT is best, or effort score is actually much better, and so on. And it almost feels like people that are following that mindset are kind of missing the point. Because ultimately, the best way to measure customer experience is, first and foremost, what is it that you want to achieve? What is the experience you want to deliver to your customers? What is your ethos? Do you want to be the preferred provider? Do you want to be the most trusted, the most loved, the most recommended? What is it that you want to achieve as a business strategy? And then fit the measure into it? Well, sometimes it feels like people are kind of fitting their business strategy around the measure because the measure is trendy or whatever. So that's probably that rigidity in thinking, my biggest challenge, you know?
Yeah, because you say it's quite often inside looking out, and people now talk about outside looking in, trying to get the customer's perspective. But I think, and also there's a lot of commentary on negatively actually about some of these measurements and really pushing back against, should you be even talking about the word satisfied? Do you want people to be satisfied, or do you want people to be delighted and wowed? And I think there has to be a touch of realism. What does your business do? What need does it fulfill for your customer base? And therefore, you would want to know whether you're wowing them because that's what you're striving to do, as you said, with your purpose, or are you simply trying to fulfill a basic need, and therefore you want to know that it's satisfaction you're creating, because that then creates longevity and loyalty. So I think you're right. But also I think for me, one measurement doesn't give you the answer. It just gives you one aspect. So you almost need to have 2 or 3 different aspects within any kind of feedback that will give you different views from that one customer on how they see your business, whether that's service, whether it's experience, whether it's marketing, whatever you're doing to engage with them. They are the things you need to understand. To what extent are they working? How are they impacting propensity to buy? And are they doing enough to create that value perception that will keep them coming back time and time again? And I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of companies are perhaps missing the point slightly by focusing too much on the metric itself.
Absolutely. And I think you're making a great point on having several metrics, right? I think if you're really serious about measuring your customer experience and you want to get it to the next level, you need to, make sure that it is driven by the business agenda rather than the other way around. But more importantly, you need to almost create a framework where you collect different insights at different points, right? If you're looking at the end of a transaction, so a post-transactional survey, you're going to ask one thing, but if you're looking relationship, talking to your entire customer base, you're going to look at something else. You're going to have verbatim across the board, and you want a system, right? You're not creating a survey, you're creating a system to listen to the customer and close that loop. And I think that's where people have been missing out on the debate. Instead of thinking, what is that one measure, is what is a suite of measures that you need to implement.
And you're right. I think there's it's one of the pitfalls I think you can fall into, and the danger is that you many companies actually create these engagements with customers in isolation of each other. So it might even be one department that might say, okay, we'll do the relational piece over here and we'll look at the transactions because that's important. They'll create those surveys separately from the one that may be driving the relationship. But by doing that, you then can't really look at the way in which the short-term transaction is impacting on the long-term relationship, because there's very little correlation. And as I say, in some businesses, they are managed by different departments who have got totally different agendas, and therefore ask, in some cases, the same question twice, and they'll ask it in different contexts. So actually, it then becomes really difficult to understand what the truth is, because you've got the same question with two different variances of response. But also, I think there's, by writing them in isolation, you lose the ability to use them as part of a broader framework to fully understand your customer. And yeah, that might be okay if you're looking from a business process perspective, but most companies aren't. They want to know how to remain relevant, how to stay at the forefront of their customers' minds. So to do that, they need to understand a bit more about what their customer drivers are, and understand what they're doing and what they can do to meet those and to maintain their position in the market, or indeed improve it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right, is when you do it strategically and you break the silos away, you have that magical aspect of the program becoming bigger than the sum of its parts. And I remember years ago, I did for a major UK bank. What we did for them, as I was a consultant, is we really helped them build a framework that looked at relationship surveys, journey surveys, transactional surveys, and connecting questions from one to the other. So you actually could link two different surveys from a conceptual level and get to a much bigger level of insights that they could just look in silo to each of the surveys. And there's so much wealth of information in that. But yes, you need to have that centralized and a well-conducted build for that to happen, which is easier said than done.
I understand that a lot of agencies who provide those solutions get this and they understand it, but sometimes it's not always easy to get it implemented, because your client, the end business user who might be commissioning the work, has a very slightly different agenda. And I think to get to that point, you need an organization that is connected in their purpose, and they need to understand that holistic view. So I think until you can get around that, as you say, those silos can be disruptive to actually finding a more holistic answer for most organizations.
Absolutely.
So I think there's also an overlap potentially for me with employee as well. And for me, when you look at employee survey versus customer survey, quite often they are separate too. They ask different things, they have different purposes. And we've certainly spoken about this before. And one of the things for me is trying to create an employee survey that also looks at, say, the customer journey in the way that you would then ask a customer about how they've experienced the journey. And in doing so, you can look at then creating a gap analysis to say, okay, what's the perception of the customer versus the understanding of the employee about that particular touch point? How important is it? Is it something that the employee focuses greatly on versus the importance of it to the customer? And do they align in a way that you know that the business is putting its best foot forward by focusing in the right areas to do the right thing for the customer? So I think there's a lot to be said around those alignments and measuring in a way that does touch on every aspect of a business, but doing so in parallel with each other rather than in silo.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So what do you think the typical pitfalls organizations fall foul of when they're setting up their voice of customer measurement solutions?
There are quite a few, right? It's I like to say that building surveys is incredibly easy. Building surveys that work or a good program is an art. But I think if I look back at my experiences and so on, the key challenges are around involving the right people, so involving the right stakeholders, having a proper governance. It's about, again, making sure that we know what we want to find out, and only designing questions that are answering questions that we can indeed fix, not because we want to, but because we can action it. And ultimately, how do you make sure that you have a closed loop system in place? When I say closed loop, I'm not saying reaching back to the customer, although it would be nice, but you get the information in, how are you going to absorb it, digest it, and drive change on the back of that information? How do you socialize? I think that driving change and socializing is the biggest challenge, because you can do everything right. Unless you drive change on the back of it, you've wasted your money. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the common pitfalls I've seen is how people are writing their questions. You're right. I mean, there's so many free survey solutions available now. It's so easy to get a form up and out to people. But how many times do you see a question that actually has two questions in it? Or how many times do you see a question that's so close to another question in the survey that when it comes to analysis, which one do you trust? Or if you end up having pre-coded answer options, you're leading the witness. You say, this is what we'd like to know. Yeah, we want to tell us how good we are, without actually the opportunity to say, well, actually, I disagree. So those are the things that for me, I quite often see in surveys where, oh, this one's not relevant to me, but I can't opt out of it. So I end up having to put an answer option in, knowing that that's totally skewed the data of that organization's insight program. They will now have a problem because they will have a handful of people to which this question is not relevant, but they've been counted in the base number, and therefore they will not get the view on the insights that they've been after. And that can be a real problem.
That's the problem, right? Is the researcher or the person designing the survey, not necessarily a researcher, goes with all the best intention of, I don't want my customer to sit on the fence. I don't want them to sit on the fence. But by removing it, you're right, you cannot trust your data. Right? I remember a couple of months ago, I saw a question that really didn't make any sense. Is like, how did this purchase compare to the last order you had with us? That was the first time I was buying from them.
Yeah.
Like, is it worse, better, exceptional, horrendous? I don't know. And obviously there wasn't the option of, this was my first purchase. Or maybe with the information they already have about me, they wouldn't even have to ask the question. But that's the thing, is that data point is useless for them, because those people that don't fit, they're not all going to say doesn't change. They're not all going to say it's better because there was nothing before. They're going to spread across, and you have no way of knowing how they spread, which is what makes proper survey question writing an art to an extent.
Yeah. And even though those questions don't need to be made mandatory in a survey, your average participant in a survey is not going to know that they could leave that question blank and move on to the next one. Because people just naturally go, okay, it's an order, it's a process, it's a linear journey that you're taking them through as they complete the survey. So you have to tell people, tell them how to answer it, or be clear on what they should and shouldn't do. But you've also got to think of the same thing as you would with any other journey. How is it for the respondent, and what are they going to find difficult and ambiguous? Because any ambiguity is going to cause confusion, which means your data isn't going to be coming back with the type of insights you're trying to achieve. So I think it's a really valid point, and one that quite often I see in a lot of surveys still that come through, where the intention is there, the understanding of what they're trying to get to is there, but if I was to complete the question, particularly if it's not relevant to me, I am then compounding the issues that they will have with the data set when they get it back. And for some companies, that can be a huge investment riding on the back of that information. Do they or don't they invest in a particular direction, or do they cut a service? And those types of decisions, which are really important, have to be based on data that is just correct and robust. And without that, it's very difficult. So you're right. It's not just about understanding the purpose of the survey, but it's about understanding what works and what will come back with the, as you say, that art form of creating that question in a way which will truly unearth and discover the insights without any overlapping or conflicting insights in the background. So it's really important. This is great. Thank you so much, Gus. Conversation's been wonderful. It's so important to understand the engagement between an organization and their customers, but then when surveying them, to make sure that you ask the right question in order to get the right outcome. I'd like to say thank you to our audience today. Please like and share the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell icon to get notifications when the next episode is launched. All the best and goodbye.